Welcome to the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and support me. It was a warm, breezy afternoon, and the waves crashed gently onto the shore of the quiet beach. Seagulls flew lazily in the sky, their cries blending with the sound of the ocean. 4 children ran along the sandy expanse, their voices full of excitement and laughter as they played a game of tag. It was the perfect summer vacation spot, remote, peaceful, and surrounded by the natural beauty of the coastline. Ethan, the oldest at 13, kept a careful eye on his younger sibling. He had always felt the responsibility to look after them, even more so since their parents left them alone for the afternoon. His younger sister Lucy, adventurous and daring, led the group, always searching for the next thrill. Behind her was Tom, the joker of the group, who had never taken anything seriously until it was too late. And finally, Sophie, the youngest at 8, trailed behind, shy and quiet, but with an uncanny ability to notice things the others often miss. Over here, his voice rang out as she darted towards a cluster of rocks at the edge of the beach. The others followed, curiosity piqued by the urgency in her tone. "What did you find?" Tom called out, his face lighting up as he caught up to her. Lucy knelt down, brushing the sand away from what looked like a strange, ornate object buried deep in the ground. She tugged at it, her fingers curling around the object, shape. As the last of the sand fell away, the children saw it clearly, an hourglass, unlike anything they had ever seen before. The glass was encased in a delicate golden frame with intricate symbols etched into the metal. "What is it?" Sophie asked, softly, her wide eyes fixated on the hourglass. "It's some kind of old hourglass," Lucy said, flipping it over to examine it more closely. Inside, a strange golden sand shimmered faintly, almost as if it were glowing. Ethan furrowed his brow. "It looks ancient. We should probably leave it alone." But Lucy, the curious one, had already turned the hourglass upside down. As soon as the sand began to trickle from one end to the other, something strange happened. The air around them seemed to thicken, and the sounds of the crashing waves faded into silence. The world itself seemed to hold its breath. "What's happening?" Tom muttered, his usual smile fading as the sky seemed to pause, seagulls frozen in mid-flight, the wind still. Before any of them could respond, a bright light erupted from the hourglass, engulfing the children. The sand beneath their feet gave way, and they felt themselves falling through time and space, until with a sudden jolt, they landed on solid ground. Ethan blinked rapidly, trying to adjust to his surroundings. The beach was gone. Instead, they stood in the middle of a dense, ancient forest, the towering trees blocking out most of the sunlight. The air smelled different, older, and the distant sound of running water replaced the ocean. "Soror." "Where are we?" Sophie whispered, her small hand clutching tightly to Ethan. "I don't know," Ethan replied, his voice tight with uncertainty, "but we're definitely not on the beach anymore." They all stood in stunned silence until the sound of footsteps on the forest floor broke their trance. A figure appeared from the shadows, cloaked in worn, tattered royal robe. His face was pale and drawn, as if weighed down by years of sorrow. "Who are you?" Lucy asked, stepping forward boldly, her hands still gripping the hourglass. The man regarded them with weary eyes before speaking. "You have arrived just as the prophecy foretold." "Prophecy?" Tom echoed, his voice tinged with disbelief. The man nodded solemnly. "The hourglass you hold is no ordinary object. It is tied to the fate of this kingdom, my kingdom. I am the last ruler of a once prosperous realm now on the brink of ruin. The Dark Lord, a master of time, has cast his shadow over us, and only the chosen ones, the ones from another world, can defeat him." Ethan exchanged a look with Lucy, Tom, and Sophie. "You must be mistaken. We're just kids." And the king shook his head. "The hourglass brought you here for a reason. You are the prophesied warriors only. You can find the Sword of Light, the only weapon capable of defeating the Dark Lord. Without it, all is lost." Lucy glanced down at the hourglass in her hand, the golden sand now still inside its glass chamber. "So we were supposed to save your kingdom." The king's eyes gleamed with hope, though it was dim. "Yes, you must find the Sword of Light before the Dark Lord tightens his grip on time itself. You are our last hope." The journey began at dawn, the children still grappling with the magnitude of the task ahead. The king had provided them with guides, 3 warriors of the kingdom who had remained loyal in the face of despair. Corwin, a grizzled knight with a deep scar running down his cheek. Lyra, a wise mage, whose silver hair belied her ageless power. And Finn, a nimble rogue whose sharp eyes missed nothing. As they set out on their quest, the children underwent rigorous training. Corwin taught Ethan the ways of the sword, helping him harness the strength he already possessed as the eldest of the group. Lyra showed Lucy how to tap into the latent magical energy that had begun to stir within her after their arrival. Even Tom, who initially treated everything like a joke, was trained by Finn in the art of stealth and agility. Sophie, though young, was not forgotten. Lyra sensed an unusual power within her, a gift for seeing things others could not, and guided her to develop this insight. Days turned into weeks, and the group grew stronger, more confident. But the weight of the prophecy hung over them like a dark cloud, a constant reminder that their success or failure meant life or death for the kingdom. Their first trial came sooner than expected. Deep in the forest of shadows, the air grew thick with tension. This was a place known for warping time itself, creating illusions that could trap even the most experienced warrior. The trees seemed to bend and twist in unnatural ways, casting long, distorted shadows that made it difficult to distinguish reality from trickery. "We have to stay together," Ethan said, his voice steady but laced with concern. "The air at this place is dangerous." As they ventured deeper, the forest played its tricks. Shadows took the form of people from their pasts, echoes of memories long forgotten. At one point, Sophie saw an image of their mother, standing in the distance, her hand outstretched, as if calling to her. It took all of Sophie's Sewell power to remind herself it was just an illusion. Lucy, ever the leader, finally spotted the hidden path they needed to take, her sharp eyes catching the faint glimmer of light that guided them forward. Together, they navigated the labyrinth of shadows, relying on each other to stay grounded in reality. Their next challenge came in the form of the Cave of Echoes, a vast, dark cavern where every sound was amplified, making it nearly impossible to communicate without creating a deafening chaos. Inside, they faced the Dark Lord's minions for the first time, creatures twisted by time, their bodies capable of moving at unnatural speeds or slowing to a near standstill. The battle was intense. Ethan fought with the precision Corwin had taught him, his sword flashing in the dim light as he parried blows from the creature. Lucy used her newfound magical abilities to create barriers and projectiles, while Tom, surprisingly focused, darted between the shadows, delivering quick strikes that disoriented the enemy. It was Sophie who ultimately saved them. Sophie, standing still as chaos erupted around her, suddenly felt a sharp pull deep inside her mind. Her eyes flickered, and she saw something, an image of the cavern walls pulsing with dark energy, tendrils of time magic snaking through the rock. The others were too caught up in the battle to notice, but Sophie knew what she had to do. "Sophie, watch out," Ethan shouted, his sword clanging against a creature, sound blade, just as it lunged toward her. But Sophie wasn't scared in that moment. She understood how to stop it all. She closed her eyes, focused, and reached out with her mind, just as Lyra had taught her. The chaotic echoes that had filled the cave, bouncing off every surface, began to quiet. She could sense the time magic, threads woven into the very air. Slowly, cautiously, she twisted those threads, bending them away from the creature. Suddenly, the minions faltered. Their speed, once impossible to counter, slowed to a crawl. Sophie had done it. She had found the way to disrupt the time magic that fueled them. Ethan, Lucy, and Tom took advantage of the sudden shift, their attacks landing solidly on the now sluggish enemy. One by one, the creatures fell, disintegrating into dust as their time-warping energy faded. When the last of the minions crumbled, the cave was still once more, save for the soft trickle of water echoing from a distant pool. Sophie opened her eyes and saw her sibling staring at her in awe. "How did you?" Ethan began, his voice filled with amazement. Sophie shrugged, suddenly shy. "I just felt it." Lucy beamed at her. "You amazing. Sophie, you saved us." Tom, for once, had no jokes to offer. He simply nodded in agreement, a rare moment of solemn respect crossing his face. The group pushed onward deeper into the cave. At its heart, they found what they had been searching for, the Sword of Light. It rested on an ancient pedestal, the blade glowing with an ethereal radiance, casting a warm light across the dark chamber. The sword seemed to hum with power, as though it had been waiting for them all this time. Ethan stepped forward, his hand outstretched toward the sword. As his fingers closed around the hilt, the glow intensified, filling the entire cave with brilliant light. But before he could even lift the sword from its pedestal, the chamber grew cold. A chilling wind swept through the cave, and the light from the sword dimmed as though it were being smothered by an unseen force. Well, a voice echoed through the cave, deep and cruel. I knew you would come for it. You children are more foolish than I imagined. Out of the shadows, the Dark Lord appeared, cloaked in black. His form seemed to waver, as if time itself distorted around him. His eyes, burning with malice, fixed on the sword in Ethan Seth's hand. You think you can use that sword against me? There were nothing but children playing at being heroes. Ethan tightened his grip on the sword, his heart pounding. He had known this confrontation was coming, but now that it was here, the fear was real. We were not just children, he said, his voice firm despite his fear, like we're the ones who are going to stop you. The Dark Lord laughed, a sound that reverberated through the cave like a thunderclap. Stop me, you can even begin to understand the power I wield. I control time itself. With a flick of his hand, the Dark Lord sent a wave of energy crashing toward them. The force of it knocked the children off their feet, sending them sprawling across the cave floor. The sword slipped from Ethan's grasp and clattered to the ground, its glow flickering weakly. The Dark Lord raised his hand again, but this time, time itself seemed to warp around them. The children found themselves trapped in a time loop, reliving the same moment over and over, the wave of energy, the fall, the clatter of the sword. Each time they tried to resist, but the loop reset, trapping them in an endless cycle. Lucy was the first to realize what was happening. We restuck, Starry, she shouted, frustration clear in her voice as they were thrown to the ground for what felt like the 100th time. Tarahi looping time to keep us from fighting back. Ethan gritted his teeth as they were knocked down again, free need to figure out how to break the loop. It was Sophie once again who saw the answer, the hourglass, the key to everything. She scrambled to her feet just as the loop reset again, her eyes darting to the hourglass Lucy had tucked away in her bag. The hourglass flipped. Sophie shouted, her voice cutting through the chaos. Lucy Emmy's eyes widened as she understood. She fumbled for the hourglass, and with shaking hands, flipped it over. The golden sand began to flow once more, and the loop shattered like glass. The world around them snapped back into real time, and the Dark Lord let out a snarl of rage. His grip on time had been broken, and now the children had their chance. Ethan leaped to his feet, grabbing the sword of light as its glow, ignited with a fierce blade. The Dark Lord lashed out with another wave of energy, but this time Ethan was ready. He raised the sword, and the blade cut through the dark magic, slicing the energy apart. Lucy, Tom, and Sophie moved in tandem, each using their unique skill. Lucy summoned a shield of light, blocking the Dark Lord's next attack. Tom darted behind the Dark Lord, distracting him with a flurry of quick strikes. And Sophie, her mind still attuned to the flow of time, disrupted the Dark Lord, sent to manipulate it, weakening his power with every second that passed. The battle was fierce, the Dark Lord's rage growing with each blow the children landed. But the tide had turned. With every strike of the Sword of Light, the darkness around the Dark Lord fractured and crumbled. Finally, with a roar of defiance, Ethan raised the sword high and brought it down in a final decisive blow. The blade struck true, piercing through the Dark Lord's chest. The dark energy that had once surrounded him exploded outward in a shockwave of black smoke, and the Dark Lord's swarm dissolved into nothingness. The cave fell silent. The Sword of Light, still in Ethan Seth's hand, glowed brighter than ever, its purpose fulfilled. The children stood together, breathing heavily but victorious. They had done it. They had defeated the Dark Lord. For a moment, they all stood in silence, still trying to process what had just happened. Then slowly, a warm light began to fill the cave. It wasn't until the light of the sword. This time, it was the kingdom itself. With the Dark Lord's defeat, the curse that had held the land in darkness was lifted. The children watched in awe as the cave walls, once cold and dark, began to shimmer with new light. Outside, they could hear the distant sound of birds singing, the first notes of life returning to the kingdom. Ethan sheathed the Sword of Light, his hand still shaking from the battle. "Shea, we did it. Chin, he said, his voice soft with disbelief. Lucy grinned, her face flushed with excitement. Ty, we really did. Dear Tom Ever, the Joker, finally broke the silence with a grin of his own. I can believe we actually pulled that off. I mean, we were just kids. Sophie smiled quietly, though her eyes still held the distant, knowing look they had gained since arriving in this world. They made their way out of the cave, the light of the restored kingdom guiding their way. When they emerged, they were greeted by the king, his face filled with joy and gratitude. You have saved us, he said, his voice thick with emotion. Yes, the prophecy has been fulfilled. The children did too stay long after that. The hourglass, now glowing with a soft golden light, beckoned them home. They said their goodbyes to the king and his people, their hearts heavy with the knowledge that they would never forget the world they had saved. With one final look at the kingdom they had restored, Lucy flipped the hourglass once more. In an instant, they were back on the beach. The waves crashed against the shore, the seagulls cawed in the distance, and time resumed as if nothing had happened. The children stood there, the hourglass now gone, the sun setting behind them, casting long shadows across the sand. For a moment, none of them spoke. Then quietly, Ethan turned to the others. Can you think we'll ever go back? Lucy shrugged, her gaze fixed on the horizon. Maybe, but even if we don't, we'll always carry a piece of it with us. Tom, with his usual grin, nudged Sophie down. Next time you're in charge of the hourglass. Okay. Sophie smiled, her eyes sparkling with a secret she knew they all shared, Fairies deal. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the four children walked back toward their beach house, their steps lighter, their hearts fuller, and their bond stronger than ever before. They had saved a kingdom, defeated a dark lord, and learned that sometimes the most extraordinary things could happen to the most ordinary of people. And though they didn't know what the future held, one thing was certain: they were no longer just kids on a summer vacation. They were something far greater.